Okay, let's get started here. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar and info session on the upcoming Kapit Bisig International Solidarity Conference and the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines 5th Global Assembly, taking place this September 25th through 27th in Toronto, Canada. My name is Judah. I'm the Canada Regional Coordinator for Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle, or FFPS, and I'll be one of your MCs today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie. I'm the Secretary General of ICHIRP in the United States, and I'll be your other MC today.
So some housekeeping before we begin. This webinar is being recorded. There are some tech support and moderators in the chat to help direct any questions or answer any questions we have or help with any technical issues. And we also ask that you please keep your audio muted until specific speakers are called upon to unmute. And yeah, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, please feel free. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Judah. The upcoming conference and assembly will bring together people from all over the world who are in solidarity with the Filipino people's struggle for national sovereignty and self-determination. The global crisis is intensifying before our eyes, with US-led war and plunder increasing to extreme levels of violence and brazenness in West Asia, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Africa. This crisis is felt acutely by the Filipino people, where the US takes advantage of the Philippine economy to export more and more wealth out of the hands of the Filipino people and uses the islands of the Philippines as a military base in their conflict with China. But the Filipino people continue to resist and address the root causes of this crisis. So now more than ever, we must strengthen the global solidarity movement for their struggle.
So at today's webinar, we're going to be hearing from Mong Palatino of Bayan Philippines on the current impacts of the US-led war of suppression on the Filipino people. We will then hear more information on the Kapit Bisig Conference and General Assembly of ICHIRP, followed by sharings from Philippine solidarity activists in Canada, the US, and Korea on their country's role in exploitation of Philippine society and why it is important for conscientious people living there to attend these assemblies. We're going to conclude with some calls for support for the conference and the assembly. So we have Mong Palatino here to start us off. We're also going to have a little bit of time, just a short amount of time after Mong's presentation to answer a couple questions related to his presentation. So if you have any questions, please share them into the chat and our moderators will flag them for us. So to start us off, we welcome Mong.
Thank you, Judah, Jesse, to friends and kasamas in North America and other parts of the world. Good evening there, good morning here from Manila. So today, July 7, in our history is the founding day of the Katipunan in the Philippines. The Katipunan led the Philippine Revolution against Spanish colonialism in 1896. And so we remember the legacy of the Katipunan as we carry on the struggle for genuine freedom and democracy in the Philippines. What is the situation of the Philippines today? The photo I chose for my first slide for the webinar is this Labor Day protest, where all labor groups united in the call for a wage increase. And KMU is carrying the banner for a living wage. So despite the nominal increase in minimum wages, workers continue to demand a living wage because of the cost of living crisis. So the poverty, the economic crisis, this is experienced daily by our fellow Filipinos. And this is the reason why Marcos has record low ratings. This is the reason why there is continuing crisis, because discontent of the people, of the suffering. That will be the backdrop of Marcos' fifth State of the Nation address this July. So we expect him to propound a new set of lies about his achievement. Maybe next he will he will claim that, oh, the Philippines is now an upper middle income economy. That's the big headline in the past few days. Of course, for ordinary Filipinos, it's meaningless. It's like the claim for many years of the government that we have high GDP, we have strong economic fundamentals. But what does it really mean for ordinary Filipinos, for migrant workers who continue to be separated from their loved ones because of lack of opportunities and continuing backward state of the economy in our country? And the big news yesterday and the big news today is the start of the impeachment trial of VP Sara Duterte. Of course, we welcome this because after so many months of delay, the trial is already starting. At the same time, we recognize the difficulty in making sure that she will be convicted. We need 16 votes to convict Sara Duterte. And if we will review the composition of the Senate, that will be a big challenge for us. So our tactic is to remind people that the impeachment is a political process. That's why we held the protest yesterday, and our message was the people are the ones who will give the judgment, not just the senator judges. And the senator judges must be reminded that the people are watching, the people are being vigilant. And we welcome the impeachment trial because it is an opportunity to present evidence against Duterte. It is an opportunity to highlight the entrenched corruption in the bureaucracy, reaching the highest offices of the land. It will serve as a reminder for other officials that they can also be held accountable. And also a reminder to the Marcos government uh, that you will face the same accountability, especially after the end of your term. And as we call for the Duterte's conviction, we do not forget in making people remember the continuing crimes of Marcos. Because if Sara Duterte is being held to account for misusing 600 million pesos in confidential funds, what about the 8 billion pesos in kickback delivery for Marcos and his closest subordinates? So we continue to demand accountability from Marcos. Uh, and okay, next. So this was the photo of the protest yesterday in front of the Senate. We were initially prevented from reaching the Senate. So, but we asserted and we were able to hold the program in front of the Senate. So there were so many umbrellas because it was really hot before a strong rain during that protest. So the banner is Sara Duterte, convict her, make her accountable. The reason why the banner only contains Sara Duterte is because we were joined by other groups, including pro-Marcos groups, who were there to demand the accountability of Sara Duterte. So, what Marcos uh, is expected to say in his State of the Nation address will be countered by the people. But now we can already say that under the Marcos government in the past 4 years, we only saw the collapse of the so-called unity and the infighting among the ruling classes became more vicious in the past year, especially after the arrest of Rodrigo Duterte, and now he is in The Hague, and the impeachment of Sara Duterte. So there is intense polarity in the political parties, and they are fighting over power, over who will enjoy the spoils in the bureaucracy, who will gain control of the resources in the bureaucracy. And what we saw since last year was further proof of the systematic corruption in the bureaucracy. 2025 uh, exposed how entrenched corruption in the bureaucracy. And for many activists, it became an opportunity to explain to our people that the problem is not just simple corruption. The problem is systemic. The problem is bureaucrat capitalism. And many people immediately understood it, that the problem is not just about officials stealing from the government. It is about officials systematically using their position to benefit their political dynasties, to benefit their cronies, campaign donors, to amass more wealth, to invest in their businesses, and to accumulate more power. So, so people easily understood what bureaucrat capitalism is. Okay. Another issue, especially in the first half of the year, after the US-Israel acts of aggression on Iran and in West Asia, is the cost of living crisis. It disrupted the oil supply, affected the global economy, and it exposed the Philippines' vulnerability to external shocks. So if in 2025, people easily understood what bureaucrat capitalism is, in 2026, it became an opportunity for us to explain that imperialism means war, imperialism means destruction of the global economy, imperialism means debt, and at the same time, neoliberal policies like privatization, deregulation, liberalization uh, do not benefit the people, but only big business, the private sector, the campaign donors, the oil cartel, the monopoly capitalists. And during the first half of the year, people realized that because of privatization, electricity rates continue to be high, oil prices remain high, and the government is ineffective in curbing oil prices, ineffective in controlling the oil supply. And that's why we have, for example, former Senate President Tito Soto, publicly calling for the repeal of the oil deregulation law. We have senators questioning the uh, inability of the government to procure oil, to control oil prices, failure to bring down the cost of electricity. Another issue under the Marcos presidency over the past year is the intensified US military and political intervention. They are now brazen. Uh, they are now more daring in establishing facilities, signing agreements with the US and the allies of the US under the guise of protecting the Philippines from China, under the pretext of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. In the news, they are portraying China as a country that will soon invade the Philippines, when in fact the US is already here and they are everywhere. And they are establishing facilities not just in EDCA sites. And the danger of the Philippines being dragged into the proxy wars and conflicts instigated by the US and its allies. Okay, next. So let me discuss further the issue of corruption, because Marcos is expected to raise this narrative as one of his main achievements in the past year. Last year, his famous soundbite was "Shame on you" or "Mahiya naman kayo." And when he said "Shame on you," the audience clapped. Members of Congress clapped, even though they are the ones responsible for the corruption-tainted flood control projects. So what happened over the past year? Marcos will say that he is the whistleblower. He is the one who exposed corruption. And our response is Shame on you, Marcos, because all evidence points to you being the mastermind of corruption, Malacanang being the ground zero of corruption. Next slide. So yes, you established the Independent Commission for Infrastructure Corruption, and the ICI already ended its work in March. And it became clear that ICI was an instrument of Marcos to shield himself and his family from investigation, to redirect the corruption investigations away from his family. The ombudsman has filed plunder charges against several individuals, correct? But our question, and we agree with the accusation that the ombudsman is engaging in selective prosecution, selective justice, because all investigations are not reaching Malacanang. The ICI, the ombudsman, they refuse to investigate the role of Malacanang in this systematic corruption. So the narrative is the contractors are corrupt, members of Congress are corrupt, some cabinet members are corrupt, but Marcos has no knowledge of this. Billions of pesos are circulating, being laundered, but Marcos, the chief executive, the one who designed the national budget, the Marcos from the infamous Marcos family who plundered the nation's wealth, has no knowledge of this systematic stealing from the national treasury. Of course, we cannot believe that narrative. And over the past year, Marcos did everything in his power to shut down the investigations in Ombudsman, to make sure that the ICI will not investigate his family and its closest allies. Okay, next. And then Marcos allies dismissed the impeachment complaint that we filed against Marcos. At the minimum, Congress should have given us the opportunity uh, to present our case and our evidence, but they used the power of the numbers. The Marcos allies dismissed the impeachment. Next, Marcos, during the at the height of the high prices in oil, we were demanding the removal of VAT. At the minimum, suspend VAT on oil, suspend excise tax on fuel products, because this will immediately bring down the price of oil. Marcos refused this because the government enjoys windfall revenues from higher prices of oil. And these tax revenues are like ATM for the corrupt bureaucrats. So we are connecting the refusal to bring down oil prices, the failure to suspend VAT, with the widespread corruption of Marcos. So if Marcos will claim in his SONA that he is pursuing corruption, of course that is a big lie. And our further proof is that almost all forfeiture cases involving the ill-gotten wealth of his family are now dismissed by the court. So that is an example of impunity. That is another example of the Marcoses of political dynasties using their position to get away from to be shielded from corruption investigation and being held to account for stealing. Okay, next. Regarding the intervention of the US. So we have 5 EDCA sites, and then when Marcos became president, he added 4 more. So officially, we have 9 EDCA sites. So by the way, the photo I used is the Luzon Littoral Regiment. They actually named US regiment after Luzon because they claim that they perfected amphibious landing by training here in Luzon. So next. And then we have year-round military exercises. So Balikatan is the main military exercise every April and May. But there are more than 500 military engagements between the US and the Philippine military, and they conduct year-round military exercises. Balikatan is the biggest, but we also have Kamandag, Cope Thunder. The US with Australia is named Kasanga. We have MAREX or in Maguindanao involving the Marines. So year-round military exercises, and these are costly, disruptive, and provocative. Disruptive to the local population because every military exercise, there is a no-sail zone policy. Fishers cannot go to the sea. Farmers cannot go near to their lands. In Bicol, they ban swimming in one part of the beach because they will use it for their military exercises. And then they became more uh, provocative by using live fire missiles. And these are costly because of the impact on the environment, resources used to host American and foreign military forces. And so another issue is we have 9 EDCA sites, but we have more than uh, 9 US facilities if we will also include other facilities. For example, Subic and Clark are not EDCA sites, but they are being used by the US for their logistics needs. They have a warehouse in Subic. They place Typhoon missile in Lawag Airport, but the Lawag Airport is not a military camp. It is not even an EDCA site. So the US is planning to build a refueling hub in Davao. They are building facilities in Batanes, the closest province near Taiwan. They are building facilities in several areas of Palawan, which are not part of EDCA. So they practically converted the whole Philippines into one big EDCA site. So recently, they transported a military truck from Mindanao to Luzon by using commercial barges. So they wanted to show here their flexibility, their ability to deliver transport vehicles and to roam across the Philippines. Okay, next. And then we have the deployment of missile systems in the Philippines. They recently fired a Tomahawk missile from Tacloban Airport to Nueva Ecija. Tacloban Airport is a civilian airport. So that is something that the US cannot do in the US. But here in the Philippines, they did that. What they wanted to demonstrate in the firing of the Tomahawk is that they are capable of launching a missile from North Luzon that can reach mainland China. So they are really using the Philippines as training ground, uh, staging ground, launching pad for its war projection. Okay, next. And then we signed the Luzon Corridor in 2024 when Biden was the president of the US. When this was unveiled, the packaging here was this is the US response to the BRI of China, Belt Road Initiative. And Luzon Economic Corridor is the first project. But what we saw in the past 2 years is not an economic corridor, but greater military build-up. They wanted to build infrastructure, yes, but this will be part of the logistics needs, war operations, military needs of the US and its allies. And the recent example of how the Luzon Economic Corridor will be developed is the Philippines signing the critical minerals deal with the US in February, and the Philippines joining the PAC Silica in April. So the critical minerals deal and PAC Silica in the Luzon Economic Corridor will lead to the plunder of our mineral losses, mineral resources, the exploitation of cheap labor, and the LEC and the PAC Silica, we should call it for what it really is. It is a new US base. They coined a new term, economic security zone. So we have economic zone, industrial parks. But now they are coining a new term, economic security zone, meaning to say they are planning to apply for diplomatic immunity. No, US laws will be applied in this uh, Luzon Economic Corridor because what they plan to build in the Luzon Economic Corridor is a weapons hub, a weapons ammunition hub, manufacturing hub for the military needs of the US. Of course, they have a fancy name for it, an AI hub, no? An AI native industrial hub that will leapfrog the Philippine economy from agrarian to cyber economy. But it is a fancy name for what they really intend to do with it. It's a weapons manufacturing hub. And Pax Silica has 2 years to develop its concept. So this is an opportunity for us to persuade legislators in the US, in other parts of the world who are also members of Pax Silica, and the Philippine government in rejecting Pax Silica because it will mean new colonization of the Philippines, new US bases, exploitation of cheap labor, plunder of our resources. And it's 1,600 hectares. Uh, 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 the size of one-fourth of Manhattan, according to the Undersecretary of State of the US. Okay, next. And then the lesson from Iran. When Iran was attacked, Iran retaliated by attacking the US bases around it. So for ordinary Americans, they may not know what bases that the Iran attacked in Qatar, in Bahrain, in UAE, because it's far from them. That will happen also to the Philippines if the enemies of the US will target EDCA sites and the Balikatan communities hosting these exercises. For ordinary Americans, they know nothing about Lalo Airport, about Lapu-Lapu in Cebu, about Masinloc in Zambales, about Santa Ana in Cagayan, Lumbia in Cagayan de Oro. If these bases are attacked, uh, for ordinary Americans, that is not Manila. That is far from Metropolis. That is not the Philippines they know. That is not Boracay or Palawan or Siargao. But for us Filipinos, these are densely populated communities. These are our kababayans living in these communities, and they could be targeted by the enemies of the US. So when Iran retaliated, it became urgent for us to call for the pull out, the dismantling of US bases, the missile systems, because they endanger our communities, they undermine our national security. Next. Okay, New Clark City, as I mentioned earlier, will be a new ammunition hub. So, New Clark, because it is near the old Clark, it will be in Capas, Tarlac. Of course, Capas has a colorful history. Capas was the site of the Death March during the Second World War. Capas used to host a US base, Camp O'Donnell. But let us not forget, Capas was also the place where the New People's Army was established. And now they are planning to build the US weapons ammunition hub in parts of Capas. Okay. Next. And this is the last slide. Okay, the picture is the transport protest in March, where we express solidarity with the transport sector. So in 2025, we saw the people's outrage against corruption. We mobilized 100,000 people in September 21. It was a nationwide protest. And then in November 30, we also mobilized tens of thousands. So what's the significance of the protest? It pressured the Marcos government to do something about corruption. It led to the change of leadership in the Senate and the House. It led to the removal of corruption-tainted infrastructure contracts. And the rallying call of the people was not the simple abolish pork barrel. The call of the people was to dismantle the bankrupt political system, reject the corrupt system. That was the call of the people because people realized flood control is just one aspect of the infrastructure mandate of the Department of Public Works. The Department of Public Works is just one agency. Maybe the whole system is corrupt. So the whole system should be overhauled. Okay, next. So, okay, next, I already mentioned the protest. So, the response of Marcos was, okay, you want to reject the bankrupt political system? Let us ban political dynasties. So, that's what they did. You have the president, the Senate president, the House Speaker, almost all legislators agreeing with the proposal to ban political dynasties. This is a game changer in Philippine politics because in the past, any proposal about the banning of political dynasties will be immediately archived, dismissed. But now, because of the people's protest, because of the people's outrage, Marcos had to respond to that, and they did that by diluting the people's call for the removal of political dynasties. Of course, they are not sincere in doing that. They simply wanted to regulate the number of family members who can run. But political dynasties under their legislative proposal will not really be banned. But this shows us the power of the people pressure, the power of public engagement, the power of activism in pushing for bolder political reforms. The only way to push for bolder political reforms is when we show up in massive numbers, when we collectively assert our demands. So that is a lesson for us for the many challenges a year ahead. So you have the ICC. The first day of the trial of Rodrigo Duterte will be on November 30. That is also a historic day for the Philippines. It's Bonifacio Day. So we support the ICC because we want to fight impunity. We want justice to be delivered, and we are doing this for the victims of Tokhang or extrajudicial killings. And a reminder to other fascists that they will also face accountability. We're also preparing for the ASEAN summit in November. We expect Trump, Xi Jinping, and other world leaders. We are hoping to highlight the intervention of the U.S., the impact of military intervention of the U.S. in the Philippines during the ASEAN summit. Okay, next. And then, of course, we are preparing for the Super El Nino. Some economists are saying that the Super El Nino the impact of Super El Nino will be bigger than the oil price shock. The Philippines is vulnerable to the extreme weather events. And so we are preparing for that. And maybe our kasamas and kababayans in North America and other parts of the world can also think of how we can extend support to our communities that will be affected by Super El Nino. Of course, corruption will be linked to this because that's why we have so many flood control projects. These corrupt bureaucrats use the language of climate change to justify the building of flood control projects. But later on, it was exposed that they used the flood control for money-making schemes. But for us in the grassroots, we need to provide assistance and also make sure that government resources are used for disaster preparation, for livelihood support, and for the extending aid to our rural communities and also flood-prone communities in urban centers. Next. Okay, and the 2028 elections may be 2 years away, but we already feel it. The impeachment is a sign that senators are also considering the 2028 in their actions. Sara Duterte has already declared her candidacy. So what we want to remind to our people is that the option should not be between Marcos and Duterte alone. The people have to make sure that the alternative is not just between these notorious corrupt dynasties, but the people establishing strength in our communities and making sure that our communities have political education and political organizing as part of our aim of establishing a government that will really work for the interests of the people. And to do that, next, we need people's continuing engagement and struggle to end impunity. Next. And of course, solidarity and resistance. We salute the kasamas in Canada. I think this the kasamas in Canada who led the protest when Marcos was in Canada. And I think the palace spokesperson was targeted with the protest, and it's news up to now. And the palace secretary continues to comment about it. So good for her. And thank you to our kasamas in Canada for doing something to make them realize that they are doing bad and that the Filipino people have friends everywhere, Filipinos and allies who are ready to protest, even heckle. That's not heckling. That's a legitimate protest to make sure that they are guilty of implementing anti-people policies. So thank you for that good news. And we are clapping when we we saw the news about Claire and the protest in Canada. So solidarity and resistance. We will protest during the impeachment. We will be inside the Senate, outside the Senate. We will be mobilizing during the SONA. We will prepare for the ASEAN summit. We will we are celebrating the solidarity that peoples all over the world are showing for the Filipino struggle. And our response is that we will step up the struggle, carry on the struggle for genuine freedom and democracy in our society. So thank you very much, kasamas. Magandang gabi, magandang umaga po.
Thank you so much, Mong. We have time for just a few questions, if that's okay, Mong. We received a few in the chat. The first question we have for you is, can you speak on the growing number of countries around the world forming military and trade agreements with the Philippines, and what is the reason for the massive uptick in these deals?
Okay. So we have VFA with the US. And then in 2012, we signed the VFA with Australia. And then under Marcos, we signed several agreements with, and then we have another RAA or Reciprocal Access Agreement with Japan. And then we signed agreements with Canada, with New Zealand, I think also with France. But these have yet to be ratified by the Senate, Philippine Senate. So only the US, Australia, and Japan have been ratified by the Senate. For the other agreements, it's just executive agreements. So this is an opportunity for us to push back and make sure that the Senate will not ratify the military agreements that we signed with other countries. So we have the US, we have Japan. So our joke here is why not sign an agreement with Spain to complete all colonial masters signing an agreement with the Philippines. But these are US and its allies. And their narrative is they are here in the Philippines to save us from Chinese aggression, Chinese bullying. But they are converting our communities into their war playground, into their training ground. For example, Japan fired its Type 88 missile in North Luzon, something that Japan cannot do in Japan. But here in the Philippines, they were allowed to fire missiles. So they are converting our communities into a war playground. So the US and its allies are using the Philippines as a battleground to make the Philippines as their cannon fodder to contain China, to contain the rise of China in their rivalry, intense rivalry over who will control this part of the world. And so we have to expose this, that this is not really for the benefit of the Philippines. This is for their geopolitical agenda. And Marcos has to be made accountable for equating the geopolitical agenda of the US and its allies with our national interest.
Well, thanks, Mong. The next question is, does the Philippines follow the normal model for U.S. military bases around the world where the host country pays between 40 and 60% of the direct costs for the base?
Well, technically, no, because technically we don't have US bases here. So they said the EDCA is not a US base. The US military facilities is not a US base. Because under our constitution, US foreign bases are prohibited. So they are naming it as EDCA, as a military facility, as a warehouse, as a refueling hub, but not a US base. And under EDCA, the US is paying for nothing. It is rent-free. So their argument is, oh, we will develop EDCA for 10 years. We will build runways. We will modernize the camp. And then after 10 years, it's yours. So we will not pay for anything for the rent. But EDCA was 2014. It is 10 years. So what happened after 10 years? There is another provision in EDCA, automatic renewal. So now we still have EDCA, and the US is still not paying for rent.
Okay, thank you, Mong. That actually is all of our questions, I believe, for right now. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. That was really amazing. And as someone from Canada, it's really special to hear that the protests were seen and felt and still are impacting. So let's all thank Mong Palatino again from Bayan Philippines for this contextual information on the situation in the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Magandang araw po.
All right. So now we're going to move on to hear from the iChirp Global Chairperson, Peter Murphy, who will share more information about the Kapit Bisig Conference and iChirp General Assembly. So passing it on to Peter.
And thanks very much, Judah. And greetings to everybody attending this Zoom about the upcoming Kapit Bisig Conference and the iChirp General Assembly. And I'm here to talk about why these are so important. I'm speaking to you from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation in Sydney, Australia. The conference theme is Kapit Bisig, linking arms across the world to stop the US war of suppression on the Filipino people. The two-day conference is convened by the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, iChirp, the Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle, FFPS, and the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, IADL. So the theme of the one-day iChirp General Assembly is March United Towards Bolder Philippine Solidarity. Now, linking arms is something all of us have done, and we've seen others doing to resist attacks by police or right-wing forces, trying to arrest our leaders, trying to break up and disperse our rallies and marches. Linking arms is our physical solidarity against repression and for our assertion of our democratic demands. Linking arms works, and we can project that experience into other forms of solidarity to advance our vision and our program for a just and peaceful world. And to link arms at the global level in relation to the Philippines, we need to share our understanding of the forces at work in that society and our connection to those forces. We need to apply our solidarity at the crucial points in the struggle. We need to know and trust each other so that we can sustain our solidarity under pressure. Above all, we need to know and trust the Filipino working people in all their diversity as they continue to build their organizations through education and struggle. We have already built these bonds of shared understanding, trust, and solidarity over decades. And even in Toronto in September, we will be able to hear the voices of the Filipino people and hear each other so that we can really link arms, Kapit Bisig, with ever greater power for democratic change. The keynote speakers at the conference come from the front lines of the struggle in the Philippines. They are Cristina Palabay, the Secretary General of Karapatan, which is the Alliance for the Advancement of People's Rights Philippines. And we just heard from Mong Palatino, the Secretary General of Bayan, the New Patriotic Alliance. And the other keynote speaker will be Mervyn Toquero. He's the Deputy General Secretary of the National Council of Churches of the Philippines. There will also be speakers from the May 1 Labour Centre, the Kilusang Maya Uno, and the Philippine Peasant Movement, the Kilusang Magbubukid ng Pilipinas, KMP. And representatives will also be there from some of the regions in the Philippines, including Mindoro and Negros. These speakers bring to our conference and General Assembly the voices of bold and courageous people's organizations in the Philippines. This will enable us to advance our objectives to build, strengthen, and advance our people-to-people solidarity with the Filipino people. Everyone will have the opportunity to hear them directly on the priority issues and campaigns as we develop the global solidarity we want for the Philippines. The conference will also include panels on the following topics. There's 4 of them. The US-led war of suppression on the Filipino people, the Filipino people's resistance, the intervention of foreign states, highlighting the role of various countries around the world in the US-led war of suppression, such as Germany, Japan, UK. We heard about it from Mong just now. And the last one on the building of international solidarity, highlighting practitioners of international solidarity and including the solidarity with the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, the NDFP. By structured discussions in our workshops, we will all deepen our knowledge of the current situation, which is so dynamic and volatile, so dangerous, and yet so open to change in the direction that people are demanding. Think about these topics and prepare as much as you can by reading and discussion prior to the conference. The massacre of the Negros 19 in April this year is the latest in a terrible series of massacres of Filipino peasants, workers, and indigenous peoples over the 80 years since the US granted a neo-colonial independence to the Philippines in 1946. The program in September includes a tribute to the Negros 19, and there will also be a public action in the streets of Toronto to honour these martyrs and to protest vehemently against these ongoing crimes. Now, the ICHRP 5th General Assembly. The struggle for democratic rights and socialism can only advance with ever stronger organisation and ever developing theory about how best to struggle in our societies. ICHRP is the organisation for this international solidarity action with the Filipino people. At our 4th General Assembly, we resolved to double the number of organisational members, and we have achieved this. And congratulations to all of these advances, especially in North America, Europe, and also the Asia Pacific. The greatest growth has been in ICHRP US. So thank you so much, and big congratulations to all of the organizations there. We have to set similar ambitious goals at the next General Assembly. To maximize what we can achieve, we encourage all ICHRP members to join the General Assembly. We invite non-members who are attending the Kapit Bisig conference to stay on to participate, but not to vote at the Assembly. The General Assembly will be a critical opportunity to strengthen our coalition and organise the broadest possible support for the Filipino people's struggle against the US Marcos regime. In our Assembly, we will have more time to spend with the keynote speakers from the Kapit Bisig conference and to discuss the urgent issues and the role of international solidarity. There will also be a number of workshops to deepen our work as a coalition, including on strengthening support for workers and peasant struggles and Indigenous people's struggles, and highlight various ICHRP member organisations and experiences in building the city, national and regional chapters of ICHRP, promoting the Philippine struggle through media, conducting grassroots fundraising campaigns, and planning learning tours to the Philippines. The Assembly will elect a new Global Council, and I encourage all of you to think of who in your organisation or chapter could contribute at that level. Don't rule yourself out when thinking about the election. Our movement needs people to step forward, to seize the moment and take our struggle to a higher level. ICHRP urges you to participate fully in this critical conference and assembly. So, see you there in September, everyone, and thanks very much for attending this webinar today.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, it's great to hear why we should all be attending. And now we're going to hear some more from a few regions on their country's specific relationship to the Philippines and why they plan to attend the Kapit Bisig conference and the ICHRP General Assembly. So we have a few regions here to speak for us. First up, we're going to start by hearing from Peter from Canada-Philippine Solidarity Organization, a member of FFPS in Canada.
Hello, thanks. My name is Peter, and I'm a member of the Canada-Philippine Solidarity Organization, a member organization of FFPS Canada. So I'm here to talk about Canada's role in militarization in the Philippines and why it's important for progressive people in Canada to attend the Kapit Bisig Global Conference and the iChirp Global Assembly. So-called Canada loves to present itself as a neutral peacekeeper, but in reality, it's highly involved in global militarization. Every year, Canada hosts CANSEC, one of the largest weapons trade shows in North America, where weapons manufacturers meet with representatives of fascist governments like Israel and the Philippines. This past May, our Prime Minister Mark Carney became the first sitting Prime Minister to open the trade show since it started in 1998. The government can't stop at just facilitating the arms trade. They're also following the USA's footsteps by putting the Canadian military directly in Philippine land and water. As part of the Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy, the Canadian Armed Forces launched Operation Horizon in 2023, and the government signed a Status of Visiting Forces agreement with the GRP at the end of 2024. And this is all to protect Canada's economic interest. Canada is selling weapons and putting troops in the Philippines because they want access to the Philippines' resources. The simultaneous negotiation of free trade agreements with the GRP and flirtation with the US-led Pax Silica initiative while bolstering their military presence proves this motivation. Carney went as far as having dictator and US puppet Ferdinand Marcos Jr. visit Canada just last week, the first official visit from a leader of the Philippines in 11 years. The visit concluded with the signing of the Joint Declaration of Intent concerning energy and natural resources cooperation, a new technical assistance partnership, and the Joint Declaration of Intent on labor and migration. As Canadians, it's our responsibility to understand how Canadian politics affects the lives of people around the world and to organize for change here at home. At the Kapit Bisig Global Conference, we'll learn from others' struggles and how they're responding. We'll get a direct opportunity to hear from people attending from the Philippines and hear both their firsthand struggles and their insights on the best actions to take to lessen Canada's role in militarization. It's an opportunity to link arms, to share knowledge between people from different organizations around the world, and use that knowledge here to make the fascists shut down the imperial arms trade, to junk SOFA, and to shut the PAX down. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So now to expand a bit more on the specific situation of the US's relationship to the Philippines, we'll hear from Brandon Lee, the chairperson of iChirp US. Brandon, are you here with us?
Hi, thank you.
Hi, Brandon.
First of all, thank you, Mong, for your presentation. Peter, for your explanation of Kapit Bisig. Here in the US, we all have seen, or we need to share this information out to the public, that the US really is the #1 terrorist in the Philippines and around the world. We need to stop the U.S. funding of the wars, of the U.S. training the military, supplying them. We have seen in the past the election system, and through the International Observer Mission, which iChirp participates in. And for that, some of our members were blacklisted. So what does the Philippines have to hide? They have a lot of atrocities, as was explained, with our very own Lyle in iChirp. We bear witness. We need to do more in our solidarity efforts to bring out workers, to bring out the church sector, to bring out people who care about the environment, and the indigenous people and people in general, to link arms and bring them out to Canada. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you very much. Finally, for one more response, we have Reverend Jin Woo from iChirp Korea and the iChirp Global Council. So welcome, Reverend Jin Woo. Oh, Reverend Jinwoo, I believe you're muted. There we go.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah. So I would like to briefly discuss the situation in Korea. Recently, the cooperation between the Korean government and the Philippines in the military sectors, especially the defense industry, has become noticeably more active. Last March, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung visited the Philippines and held a summit with President Marcos. And on last May, the Korean-Philippine Joint Commission on Defense Industry was held in Seoul, making closer defense industry cooperation more tangible. Currently, Korea is striving to strengthen arms export to the Philippines, leveraging the elevated international standing of its defense industry following the war in Ukraine and Iran. However, this issue is currently failing to receive significant attention with the Korean progressive peace movement groups, overshadowed by issues concerning Palestine and Ukraine. Actually, Korean civic groups and ecumenical organizations are relatively more sensitive to human rights issues in the Philippines. Korean civil and religious groups have a deeper interest in the massacre that occurred in Negros last April and the issue of political prisoners. It's Korea civil society have many concern about the human rights issue than the other in industry or the diplomatic. We Korean groups look forward to the BG conference and the fifth General Assembly of ICHOP to be held in September, opening a forum for more substantive international solidarity to resolve human rights issues in the Philippines. In particular, a special campaign for the release of Filipino prisoners of conscience is currently being prepared in Korea, organized by the Philippine migrant workers in Korea. Now is about 70,000 Filipino migrant workers working in Korea, and few ecumenical human rights groups in Korean churches. We ask for your strong solidarity and cooperation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Jinwoo, and thank you to Brandon and Peter as well for sharing some of that information and reflections on how your country relates to the exploitation of the Philippines and why it's important for us to be in solidarity and attend these events. We hope that people from all countries of the world will join us in Toronto. Folks from the multitude of regions that were not spoken on today, please feel free to share your knowledge in the chat if you're here, so we can all learn more about how different countries and regions relate to the Philippines and why international solidarity is important. For our last speaker for today, we're going to be hearing from Lutfi, the chair of ITRIP Canada, who will share more information about registration and logistics for the conference and assembly.
Yeah, thank you, Chase, and thanks everyone for attending the webinar today. I will just give some information on the conference registration details, and we also need some help on some of our organizing committees. So if folks would like to get involved in some of those, I'll talk a bit more about that. So right now, registration for the conference is open. You can register at iChirp.net/capitbsig. So over there, you will see a registration form embedded at the bottom of the page itself. But if you are having issues with filling in that form, there is also a link just above where you can open the form on a different page, and it might be easier to fill out that way. So when you fill out the form, yeah, it will ask for your personal information, passport, and the passport bio page and your emergency contact. We won't keep around the passport bio information after the conference. It's mostly just for verification purposes. And then if once you go on with the registration, it will also ask if you're going to be attending just the Kapit Bisig conference or the conference and the iChirp GA, whether or not you're attending as an iChirp member or observer. So those are two different options. For the iChirp GA, it's primarily for iChirp members, but friends of iChirp are of course welcome, and we encourage you all to attend as observers too. Yeah, and then it will ask a couple more details like travel details. How are you traveling to Canada? Do you need a visa? Some information on dietary restrictions, any medical conditions that the organizing team should be aware of, any accessibility needs, and language or interpretation needs. And then finally, it will ask for payment as well. So just to remind folks, the registration fee for the conference, if you're attending for 3 days, it will be if you're attending all 3 days, the registration cost will be 175 Canadian dollars or 130 US dollars or 110 euros. And for those only attending the conference, the registration will be 150 Canadian dollars, 110 USD, and 95 euros. Then just a couple more things to take note. In terms of the payment method, so the payment method for your registration fee will depend on your country of residence. So if you are already in Canada, we are asking folks to pay the registration fee by e-transfer. So if you complete the registration form, the email will be there. For folks outside of Canada, please get in touch with your either your FFPS or your iChirp country chapter for details on how to pay the registration fee. We did it this way so that it's easier for participants to pay using like methods that work better locally, because there are different payment methods that people use in different countries. And then some other things to note in terms of registration and logistics. We're asking folks to please try to register by August. Please register by August 15th so we can get a sense of how many people are attending the conference. The registration costs will go towards the cost of food and bringing some wonderful speakers from the Philippines and organizing some great panels, which we are really excited to have you all attend. The meals will be provided for the conference, except for dinner on the first day, because there will be a mobilization on the evening of the first day. And then, unfortunately, we will not be able to cover accommodations. So folks attending the conference will need to kind of arrange their own housing and accommodations in Toronto. There will be information on the conference venue and some recommendations on where to find accommodation that will be sent out upon your registration. And for folks who have already registered, I believe the registration under the host committee is working on that advisory, so that will also come soon. And yeah, I think that's all I have for registration details. And then in terms of the committees, yeah, so there are a couple committees that we are putting a call out for people to join to volunteer and help out with. So the first one is the Income Generating Project Committee. So this committee will be responsible for producing T-shirts and other materials for sale at the conference. The second one is the Language/Interpretation Committee, which will be coordinating translation of materials and any live interpretation needs for the conference. And the last one is the Prop and Media Committee, which will be responsible for creating and putting out social media posts and outreach to interested groups. So we have a sign-up form for people who are interested in joining these committees. I will drop them in the chat shortly after this. But yeah, if you have any further questions, you can ask in the chat, or Drew, I don't know if there is an email where folks can reach out with further questions. Okay, maybe if not, we'll share that later. Yeah, that's it for the information that I have.
Cool. Thanks so much, Lufthi, and to all who shared with us today. Despite the pain and the suffering caused by US-led war, exploitation, and state terror, the Filipino people still continue to fight and bring hope to people all across the world that another world is truly possible. And I know that people are also here because they too believe that is possible to achieve justice and create that genuine change. So let's see this Kapit-Bisig Conference and ICHRP General Assembly as an important step in achieving that victory. So we hope everyone here will join us this September 25 to 27 in Toronto, Canada. And also invite more people to join you who aren't here with us tonight, because as solidarity activists, one of our main tasks right now is to strengthen the solidarity movement for the Philippines and every corner of the world. So again, we invite everyone here to please register today through the link that's been shared a few times in the chat, and share it with others. And if you have questions about the conference and assembly, please reach out to your local ICHRP and FFPS chapters, or you can go to the Contact Us page on ichirp.net. That brings us to the end of our webinar this evening. Thank you again, everyone, for being here, and see you soon in Toronto.